What do you do when your country is surrounded on all sides, your economy is bombed to dust, and you can easily be drafted for frontline service? Most will resign to their fate and face the enemy at the front. Some will flee or do everything to dodge having to fight. However, some choose to devise projects that were amazing on paper, with superior overall characteristics, while they try to mask the impracticality and disconnect from reality. This was the case with many Germans who were involved with work for the Luftwaffe, German Air Force, during the later stages of the Second World War. Such was the case with Heinz Sombold, who introduced the highly unconventional SO-344 Parasite missile interceptor. Towards the end of the Second World War, Germany faced significant challenges in defending itself against the threat of Allied bombers. The existing single and twin-engined day and night fighters proved unable to stem the tide pounding Germany day and night. As the intensity of Allied air raids increased, German authorities explored various unconventional, extremely unorthodox, or downright strange approaches to counter them. These ranged from carrying specialized weapons to even ramming enemy bombers. Such initiatives were driven by the need to utilize readily available materials and limited resources, while still attempting to inflict maximum possible damage on the enemy. Some other unusual aircraft designs that saw use included the Mistel. This project involved the combination of a fighter aircraft with a bomber. The fighter would be attached to the top of the bomber, which was heavily loaded up with explosives. The intention was to guide the bomb/bomber toward the enemy and then detach the bomber to impact and explode. While some Mistels saw operational use, Allied air supremacy essentially made this project irrelevant. The Germans were also experimenting with rocket-powered interceptors in the form of the Messerschmitt Me-163. This was a small, highly maneuverable interceptor, and although it had limited fuel and flight time, it could reach incredible speeds, allowing it to engage enemy bombers quickly. Its volatile fuel shortages, and limited production run essentially negated the effectiveness of this aircraft. As resources dwindled and desperation grew, some German air planners presented various designs that were intended to directly ram enemy air targets. These were not seen as a direct equivalent of the Japanese kamikaze, as they hoped the pilots would survive the ordeal. Luckily, such projects never went beyond the drawing board. Other projects involved finding an alternative way to put an aircraft in the sky. Normally, an aircraft would take off horizontally from an airfield. With the increased Allied bombing raids, airfields deep inside Germany were not safe anymore. Launching an aircraft vertically would remove the need for long airfields. For this purpose, the Bahim BA-349 Nata was designed. Although not used operationally, the BA-349 was a small bomber interceptor that would not require an airstrip to take off. Instead, it would be launched vertically from a launch rail. After taking off, the BA-349 would approach the Allied bombers and attack them with a salvo of rockets held in the nose. With its ammo depleted, the pilot would then eject from the aircraft, with the aircraft's engine section parachuting down and being recovered for reuse. The nose would break off when the pilot fired the rockets under the cone. Other designs, such as the Sombold SO-344 we will focus on today, would approach the destruction of enemy bombers in an entirely different, almost ludicrous way. This plane spawned from the mind of Heinz Sombold, who worked as an aircraft engineer at Bläser Flugzeug, a sailplane manufacturer in Naumburg, Germany. During the 1930s, they had become famous for their various sailplane and glider designs. Sombold began working on the SO-344 in 1943, and it incorporated many features of the sailplanes built by the company. Initially, the aircraft was developed as a Parasite escort fighter armed with 2 machine guns. On January 22nd of 1944, however, Sombold would drastically change the design and purpose of the aircraft, now aiming to destroy enemy bombers. That same year, his project received a green light from the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the German Ministry of War. In order to fit this new role, a very unorthodox weapon system would be used. The defining feature of the modified SO-344 was its nose cone, which housed a rocket filled with 400 kilograms, 888 pounds of explosives. The pilot could launch this rocket at enemy bombers, with the intention of causing extensive damage or destruction to multiple aircraft in a close formation by targeting the combat boxes used by American bombers for mutual defense. Sombold imagined that one well-placed explosive could potentially eliminate multiple aircraft at once. The Germans had already deployed various weapons to try and damage closely packed formations, but none would have as huge a payload as Sombold's nose rocket. The Sombold SO-344 was designed as a single-man special attack aircraft. Heinz Sombold intended this aircraft to be compact and easily transportable, with a short and tubular body. Due to shortages of metals, it was likely meant to be constructed using mostly wood, and the aircraft could be divided into two sections for convenience during transport. The cockpit was located at the rear of the body, just in front of the vertical stabilizer. The wings were mid-set, and conventional control surfaces were present on both the wings and the stabilizers. The landing mechanism of the SO-344 involved a rounded skid built into the body, allowing the aircraft to land smoothly and safely, at least in theory. For its power plant, the SO-344 would have probably used a Volta bi-fuel rocket engine. Given that this rocket engine was already used by the Me-163, it would be logical to assume that the Germans would reuse some components that were already in production. This engine used a mixture of T and C-Stoff. T-Stoff consisted of a mix of hydrogen peroxide with oxyquinoline or phosphate. C-Stoff was a mix of methyl alcohol, hydrazine hydrate, and water. The volatile nature of the fuel combinations used in the Volta rocket engine led to accidents and explosions during the operation of the Me-163. Accidents involving the fuel caused the loss of several aircraft and their pilots. Due to the corrosiveness and toxicity, extensive safety procedures were required when handling these chemicals, and the maintenance crews had to take great care in storing, handling, and refueling the aircraft to minimize the risk of accidents. In order to conserve fuel, the aircraft would be deployed by a bomber mothership. Once deployed, it would have around 25 minutes of fuel. The primary armament of the SO-344 was a large unguided rocket in its nose cone. This rocket carried a significant amount of acetal explosive, weighing 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. The rocket was triggered by a proximity fuse, enabling it to detonate upon reaching a certain distance from the target. Additionally, the aircraft was equipped with two forward-facing machine guns, or possibly even cannons, which could be used for self-defense or attacking other bombers after releasing the main payload. After being deployed from a modified bomber mothership, the SO-344 would approach enemy bomber formations from above. It would dive down on bombers, coming in at them from at least 1,000 meters, or 3,300 feet, above. In theory, the SO-344 would rapidly descend toward the bombers, which would prevent the enemy gunners from engaging it at this angle of attack. Once the SO-344 was lined up with a group of bombers, the pilot would launch the nose cone into the middle of the formation. The resulting explosion was expected to take down multiple bombers simultaneously due to the close proximity of the aircraft in the formation. After launching its nose cone, the SO-344 would have some fuel left and could continue to attack the remaining bombers with the two machine guns. When its fuel supply ran low, it would return to base by gliding, similar to the Messerschmitt Me-163, and use a large ski to land. The SO-344 was a very strange way of approaching the bomber problem over Germany late in the war, but the logic behind it was not too far-fetched. The aforementioned BA-349 Natter followed a similar attack plan, approaching the bombers and firing off a salvo of rockets before the pilot bailed from the craft. Design work on the SO-344 continued through 1944, even going so far as having a small-scale wind tunnel model being made and tested at the Blay facility. The drawings and calculations were sent to RLM during the summer of 1944. By 1945, work on the project was cut off, as the Blay facility had to be abandoned due to the encroaching front. No further work was done on the SO-344, and Heinz Sombold's fate is unknown. No other designs from him are known to have existed. A photo has circulated in several books as well as online that claims a nose cone of the SO-344 was built and discovered by the Allies at the end of the war. However, this photo actually depicts the nose section of a Wasserfall surface-to-air missile. The nose of the Wasserfall could easily be confused for that of the SO-344, as the shape was rather similar and both had 4 stabilizing fins. No SO-344s are believed to have been built by the end of the war, and in essence it was a flawed concept. The fact that the aircraft had a single shot from its rocket payload made accuracy extremely important. The SO-344 also would have been a prime target for Allied escort fighters once it ran out of fuel. A bomber would also need to be modified to carry the SO-344 and would be a prime target for the escort fighters once the attacker was launched. The nature of the aircraft has led it to wrongly be named a suicide attacker by many post-war books on the subject. In some instances, the craft is also incorrectly listed as being a ramming aircraft, which it was not. It and other late war projects represented Germany's attempts at countering the overwhelming Allied air superiority with unconventional and resource-conscious methods. While some of these ideas were implemented to varying degrees, they were unable to alter the course of the war to any significant degree. The Allied bombing campaign, coupled with Germany's overall military situation, ultimately led to the defeat of the Axis powers in the Second World War. This concludes our video on the bizarre SO-344 Parasite interceptor. Considering the whole design, would you think it was worth developing, or was the whole concept flawed from the start? What would you have altered to make it work? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future videos, and be sure to explore our extensive collection of articles on our website at plain-encyclopedia.com. Thank you for your support.